Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors, brothers and sisters. I thought we could do a brief reading here of the last act last scene in Act 3 of Hamlet. The moon's coming up now, and it's almost time to take our leave, go to bed. But nevertheless, I got myself a brand new text. Can you see that? A brand new text? Yeah, brand new text of Shakespeare's Hamlet because I get just really tired of using the other one, which is so hard for me to manage. So here's a new text, and we're going to be reading from Act 3, Scene 4. Remember that Hamlet has just had the play to catch the conscience of the king, and he sort of did. I mean, there's certainly a reaction from the king, and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern tried to ferry out his inner secret. And here we are now with the aftermath. Polonius has decided to enter into the chamber of the queen when Hamlet goes to visit her so that he can be privy to whatever is being said. So here we are, Act 3, Scene 4 of Hamlet. The queen's private chamber. Enter Queen Gertrude and Polonius. Polonius. I will come straight. Look you, lay home to him. Tell him his pranks have been too broad to bear with, and that your grace hath scorned or screened and stood between much heat and him. I'll silence me even here. Pray you, be round with him. Hamlet within. Mother! 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 Gertrude says, I warrant you, fear me not. Withdraw, I hear him coming. Polonius hides behind the arras. Enter Hamlet. Now, mother, what's the matter? Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended. Mother, thou hast my father much offended. Come, come, you answer with an idle tongue. Go, go, you question with a wicked tongue. Why, how now, Hamlet? What's the matter now? Have you forgot me? No, by the rood. Not so. You are the queen, your husband's brother's wife, and would it were not so, you are my mother. Nay, then I'll set those to you that can speak. Come, come, sit you down. You shall not budge. You go not till I set you up a glass where you may see the inmost part of you. What wilt thou do? Thou wilt not murder me? Help! Ho! Polonius behind the arras. What? Ho! Help! What? How now? A rat? Ha! Dead for a ducat! And he stabs him. Oh, I am slain, says Polonius. Oh me, what hast thou done? Nay, says Hamlet, I know not. Is it the king? Oh, what a rash and bloody deed is this. A bloody deed, almost as bad good mother as kill a king and marry with his brother. As kill a king? Aye, lady, 'twas my word. He lifts up the arras and he sees Polonius. Thou wretched, rash, intruding fool, farewell. I took thee for thy better. Take thy fortune. Thou find'st to be too busy, in some danger. Leave wringing of your hands. Peace, sit you down, and let me wring your heart. For so I shall, if it be of penetrable stuff. If damned custom have not brazed it so that it be proof and bulwark against sense. What have I done, that thou darest wag thy tongue in noise so rude against me? Says Gertrude. Such an act that blurs the grace and blush of modesty, calls virtue hypocrite, takes off the rose from the fair forehead of an innocent love, and sets a blister there, makes marriage vows as false as dice as oaths. Oh, such a deed as from the body of contraction plucks the very soul. Sweet religion makes a rhapsody of words. Heaven's face does glow o'er this solidity and compound mass with heated visage, as against the doom is thought sick the act. I mean, what act that roars so loud and thunders in the index? Look, here, upon this picture, and on this, the counterfeit presentment of two brothers. See what a grace was seated on this brow! Hyperion's curls, the front of Jove himself, an eye like Mars, to threaten and command, a station like the herald Mercury new lighted on a heaven-kissing hill, a combination and a form, indeed, where every god did seem to set his seal to give the world assurance of a man. That was your husband. Look you now what follows. Here is your husband, like a mildewed ear blasting his wholesome brother. Have you eyes? Could you on this fair mountain leave to feed and batten on this moor? Huh? Have you eyes? You cannot call it love, for at your age the heyday and the blood is tame, it's humble, and waits upon the judgment. And what judgment would step from this to this? Sense, sure you have, else could you not have motion, but sure that sense is apoplexed, for madness would not err, nor sense to ecstasy. It's now so enthralled, but it reserves some quantity of choice to serve in such a difference. What devil was't that thus hath cozened you at hoodman blind? Eyes without feeling, feeling without sight, ears without hands, or eyes smelling sans all, or but a sickly part of one true sense could not so mope. Oh, shame, what is thy blush? Rebellious hell, if thou canst mutin and a matron's bones to flaming youth, let virtue be as wax and melt in her own fire. Proclaim no shame when the compulsive ardor gives the charge, since frost itself is actively to burn, and reason panders will. Oh, Hamlet, speak no more. Thou turn'st mine eyes into my very soul, and there I see such black and grained spots as will not leave their tinct. Nay, but to live in the rank sweat of an enseamed bed, strewed in corruption, honeying and making love over the nasty sty. Speak to me no more. These words like daggers enter in my ears. No more, sweet Hamlet. A murderer and a villain, a slave that is not 20th part the tithe of your precedent lord, a vice of kings, the cutpurse of the empire, and the rule that from a shelf the precious diadem stole and put in his pocket. No more. Enter the ghost, a king of shreds and patches. Say to me, now roar me with your wings, you heavenly gods. What would your gracious figure? Alas, he's mad, says Gertrude. Do you not come, your tardy son, to chide that lapsed in time and passion? Let's go by the important acting of your dread command. Oh, say. Do not forget, this visitation is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose. But look amazement on thy mother sits. Oh, step between her and her fighting soul. Conceit in weakest body's strongest works. Speak to her, Hamlet. How is it with you, lady? Alas, how is it with you? You depend your eye on vacancy, and with incorporeal air
dual discourse. Forfeit your eyes, your spirits wildly peep, and as the sleeping soldiers in the alarm, your bedded hair, like life and excrement, start up and stand on end. Gentle sun, upon the heat and flame of thy distemper sprinkle cool patience. Whereupon do you look? On him. On him. Look you, how pale he glares. His form and cause, conjoined preaching to stones, would make them capable. Do not look upon me, lest with these piteous action you convert my stern effects. Then what I have to do will want true color, tears, perchance for blood. To whom do you speak this? Do you see nothing there? Nothing. Nothing at all. Yet all that is I see. Nor did you hear nothing? No, nothing but ourselves. Why, look you there. How it steals away. My father, in his habit, as he lived. Where he goes even now out at the portal. Exit the ghost. This is the very coinage of your brain. This bodiless creation. Ecstasy. It is very cunning in. Ecstasy. My pulse as yours doth temperately keep time and makes us healthful music. It is not madness that I have uttered. Bring me to the test, and I the matter will reword which madness would gambol from. Mother, for love of grace, lay not that flattering unction upon thy soul, that not your trespass, but my madness speaks. It will but skin and film the ulcerous place, whilst rank corruption mining all within infects unseen. Confess yourself to heaven. Repent what's past. Avoid what's to come. And do not spread the compost on the weeds to make them rancor. Forgive me this, my virtue, for in the fatness of these pursy times, virtue itself is vice must pardon beg. Yea, curb and woo for leave to do him good. Oh, Hamlet, thou hast cleft my heart in twain. We'll throw away the worser part of it, and live the pure with the other half. Good night. But do not go to my uncle's bed. Assume a virtue if you have it not, that monster custom, who all sense doth eat of habit's devil, is angel yet in this, that to the use of actions fair and good he likewise gives a frock or livery that aptly is put on. Refrain tonight, and that shall lend a kind of easiness to the next abstinence, the next more easy, for use almost can change the stamp of nature, and either the devil or throw him out with wondrous potency. Once more, good night. And when you are desirous to be blessed, I'll blessing beg of you. For this same Lord I do repent, but heaven hath pleased it so to punish me with this with me, that I must be their scourge and minister. I will bestow him, and will answer well the death I gave him. So again, good night. I must be cruel, only to be kind. Thus bad begins, and worse remains behind. One word more, good lady. What shall I do? Not this, by no means, that I bid you do. Let the bloat king tempt you again to bed, pinch wanton on your cheek, call you his mouse, and let him for a pair of reachy kisses, or paddling in your neck with his damned fingers, make you to ravel out all this matter, that I, essentially, am not in madness, but mad in craft. For good you let him know. For who that's but a queen, fair, sober, wise, would from a paddock, from a bat, a jib, such dear concernings hide? Who would do so? No, and despite of sense and secrecy, unpeg the basket on the house's top. Let the birds fly, and let the famous ape to try conclusions in the basket creep and break your own neck down. Thou should. If words be made of breath, and breath of life, I have no life to breathe what thou hast said to me. I must to England, you know that. Alack, I had forgot. 'Tis so concluded on. There's letters sealed. And my two schoolfellows, whom I trust as I will adders fanged, they bear the mandate. They must sweep my way and marshal me to knavery. Let it work, for 'tis the sport to have the engineer hoist with his own petard, and shall go hard, but I will delve 1 yard below their minds, and blow them at the moon. Oh, 'tis most sweet, when in one line 2 crafts directly meet. This man shall set me packing. I'll lug his guts into the neighbor room. Mother, good night. Indeed, this counselor is now most still, most secret, and most grave, who was in life a foolish, prating knave. Come, sir, to draw toward an end with you. Good night, mother.
Hello again. I had to take a quick break, but there's more to be said about this act. The commenting on Act 3, Scene 4, there's a great deal to be said about this. Let me start first with just the structure of the play. Most Shakespearean plays have 5 acts. That's where we get the term the 5-act structure. And normally in the 3rd act, we have the pinnacle of tension in the play. It's a high point of tension. It's really where the first climax of the play really occurs, because all that's been building up to that point is right here in the 3rd act. And certainly we get it in spades in this scene, because we've just had the play within a play that drives Claudius to reveal himself, or it seems like he's revealing himself. And then we have in this scene, we have the first real death on stage that has occurred in the play. Up till now, we haven't had a real death on stage. We've had implied death. We've had the play within a play. We've had the reference to death. But we've not had an actual death on stage. And certainly for an Elizabethan audience, and even for our audiences, death on stage or death on a screen punctuates some crisis coming to a fever pitch. We've got Polonius, who's hiding behind the arras in order to listen into the conversation. Remember that Polonius he's partly the fool of the play, but he's also this social climber. He's like this almost puritanical sense that wants to ferret out the truth, even though he's too dim to catch the truth all the time. He wants to be a mover and a shaker in society. He wants to view the innermost secret of things, and yet he's not really capable of doing so. He doesn't have the mental capacity really to do so.
He's a foolish prating knave, as Hamlet says at the end of the scene. So he's hiding behind the Aras, and again, that's part of that mask thing that we talked about earlier in our reading way back when. The whole play is about wearing masks and wearing yeah, right. It's like wearing masks and then trying to find out what the real heart of the issue is. And in this case, Polonius is wearing the mask of the Aras, which he thinks will protect him from all the danger, where he can be like a fly on the wall and just see what's going on. But it turns out it's not that way, because of course when things get heated or seem to be getting heated, it is played as though Hamlet was going to kill the queen, kill Gertrude. And so then Polonius's survival instinct takes off, and he reveals himself. He reveals himself figuratively, I guess. Um, he comes out and reveals himself actually, like help, help behind the Aras. And if played well, the whole thing takes place behind the Aras. An Aras, by the way, is a tapestry, a large tapestry that would help make those freezing cold castles warmer. Um, but Hamlet stabs him not because he wants to kill Polonius, but he stabs him because he thinks he might be the king. And remember, he's wanting to kill Claudius, not when Claudius is praying, but when Claudius is in the incestuous bed, as he says, or when he's he's in his cups, or he's doing something sinful, so that he can send him to hell instead of to heaven. So he figures, well, here's the king. The king is spying on us. I'm going to get him now. And that's when he stabs him and finds out afterwards that it's Polonius, the father, if you remember, of Hamlet's beloved, Ophelia. Oops, kind of did that one in. So he stabs him and then immediately turns to his mother in order to continue trying to, as he says, wring her heart. But because he himself has been aggressive at first and has then killed Polonius, she thinks he's going to kill me next. So she's terrified in this scene. She had originally wanted to be stout with him and to confront him and say, "Stop playing these political games. That you actually have insulted the king." But Hamlet then turns it on her, and he comes at her very vigorously, very violently. So the mask of Hamlet actually comes off. The mask of madness and of playfulness comes off, and we see for a moment the real person behind the mask to a certain degree. So just as earlier in the play we talked about masks, and here we have Polonius hiding behind the mask of the Aras, so too Hamlet has taken off the mask of insanity and is now confronting Gertrude directly with the problem. Now, there was a lot of ink spilled over this issue, and I think in some productions it's done more than others, that says that there's something of the incestuous thing between Hamlet and his mother. I tend to think that that's a misread. First off, I don't think that Shakespeare was as hung up about certain aberrant sexuality practices that we are today. He's not hung up about wanting to prove that some forms of sexuality are better than others, and that's not what he's doing. He's examining human nature, and in this case, he's examining human nature through a highly symbolic play. So I really, really doubt that he would have as one of his themes an incestuous moment between Hamlet and his mother. That being said, we have to remember that both Gertrude and Claudius, as well as Hamlet Sr., are representational in the play as well as actual figures in the play. And what does Gertrude represent? I think she represents what the mother of anybody represents. Just as the father, Claudius, represents what the father represents for any human being. Shakespeare's a master of psychological understanding, and his plays always embody a very deep psychology. So, as I said earlier, the death of Hamlet Sr. is to a certain degree the death of a person's connection to law and order and structure and discipline, which is what the father psychologically embodies for us. And when the real father dies, a fake father takes his place as sort of a law is just fabricated, law is something we can buck, law is tawdry, honor is tawdry, royalty is tawdry, all that masculine stuff is tawdry and false and fake. Gertrude, the queen, the mother, represents that intuitive sense of care and nurturing and loving and intuition. And in this case, he is Hamlet sees her as still the one living parent that he has to cling to, but also sees her as the loving side of his psyche that he doesn't want to lose. I don't think that it has anything to do necessarily with body parts, with sexuality in that way, except that every single human being, to some extent, has to grapple with the idea that sexuality is part of our life, that we are all of us physical creatures, and grappling with that, especially grappling with what appears to a child some degree as terrifying or horrible, that it is the sexual act. I think grappling with that can mar a person deeply or can change the way that they mature or don't mature. There's a great hyperbolic play of this nature called Equus, and I forget the playwright. It might be Tom Stoppard, but it's a fantastically horrible play. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. It's a good play, but it's horrible, and it really pushes the limits of this image. When we find out as young people, not only that we have entered into a world of sexuality, being male or female, but that our parents did so that we can come into this world, it can be very daunting. It can be very psychologically daunting for us to grapple with the fact that our parents engaged in the same thing that we desire to engage in and engage in ourselves. This is perfectly natural, right? Not only the act itself is part of our natural being as humans, but to come up against this daunting sort of terror or fear of it as young people is perfectly natural. It's part of what we are as humans to confront something which is overwhelming. Sexuality is overwhelming for us. And when we become aware of it, suddenly we see it everywhere, and it can be threatening, it can be daunting to us. In order to compensate for that, in order to overcome that hurdle, one has to have a certain level of guidance, a certain level of training, or a certain level of ethics to guide us in the right direction. Otherwise, we become real basket cases, and there are plenty of people who have been damaged sexually who then are also damaged psychologically and have to grapple with that for the rest of their lives. In this play, I think Shakespeare is addressing that more than he's addressing the incest problem, because it is coupled with the whole idea of madness. It's coupled with the whole idea of the scholastic problem. It's coupled with the whole idea of love. It's no coincidence that the father that is killed by Hamlet is the father of the woman that Hamlet loves, Ophelia. That's not accident. Shakespeare intentionally makes it so that Hamlet, in killing Polonius, also is killing the father figure of the woman that he loves. Talk about a Freudian problem there. So in this scene, I think what he's really doing is he's having Hamlet confront his mother with what he is dealing with. And because Shakespeare is not going to talk in terms of psychology, I'm dealing with the scholastic problem of images and whether they're connected to anything. Instead, what he's going to do is he's going to embody it in actions on the stage. And Hamlet says, how could you step from this Hyperion, my father Hamlet, to this misshapen, horrendous clod of earth, Claudius? In a way that is like the child seeing the father as a godlike figure and suddenly having to grapple with the idea that the father is not a godlike figure. The father is just another man, just a human who suffers just like we, like the son does. To grapple with that, again, it's one of those daunting things. Did my father have desires and worries and sorrows and hatreds and angers the way I do? Of course he did. But how do I deal with that as a young person? How do I deal with that as a person, period? Especially if that is simultaneous
with a struggle with the nature of reality itself. All these images and ideas that my father, as a great man, put forth to be true are now no longer true, right? They're just constructs of the human mind. They're not connected to anything. How do I grapple with that? And why would my mother, my intuition, if you will, why would my mother step from this lordly, godlike, perfect Cary Grant sort of figure to this clod of earth, this menial person, this, shall we say, mortal? Why would she do that? And then in the midst of it, and this is why this scene is such a great, like, talk about story arc. This is the 5-act structure. This is the climax of this play to a certain degree. There are other climaxes as we continue the story of Hamlet and where he's headed. But this is like the paragon of the summit of action and tension in the play. In the midst of his chastising Gertrude, in comes the ghost. Right? In comes the ghost. And the line right before the ghost appears, I think, is particularly apt. He's just, I think Hamlet's just going off on his mom. How can you do this? How can you step from this God to this clod? How can you betray me and betray everything that you've ever stood for? And then he says, a king of shreds and patches. And then in walks the ghost, and he has that immediate reaction. Why would that line, a king of shreds and patches? It's almost, he's talking about Claudius. Yeah, that Claudius is a king of shreds and patches. He's not a whole man. He is shreds. He's patched up. He is trash put together. And really, that's the vision that one has when you fall into the, Shakespeare would say, trap of nominalism. If we don't see anymore a whole human being, then what do we see? We see cells and liquids and bones and hairs kind of all patched together and sewn up and made to run like a top or like a wind-up doll on the face of the earth. Like a Frankenstein. Right? Frankenstein was made, the monster who was made by Victor Frankenstein, a monster of shreds and patches, of pieces sewn together. And it's at that moment that Hamlet sees the ghost. He's, I think, in this berating of his mom, he's spiraling down into this rage and anger over the problem that the world is just a clanking collection of Caligula's material. What is it that the Wizard of Oz says about the Tin Man? And as he's spiraling down into that, suddenly comes the vision again of the whole man. Now, there's a lot of ink spilled over the idea that Hamlet has held up his father way too high, put him on a pedestal and all this. And I think to some degree he has. But what young man, what young woman with a good father doesn't do that to their dad? Doesn't do that to adults in general. We hold up our first grade teacher as being so wonderful. We hold up our father as being so wonderful. Our mother's so wonderful, chaste and pure. We think of certain figures, even we could say saints in the church, or presidents of the United States. Washington, who chops down the cherry tree, never told a lie, pure, lily white of hue. We put them up on a pedestal. And that's what children do. And it's probably right that they do, because we have to have heroes. That's the whole man image. That's the man cast in gold. But in the midst of thinking about the world as just a bunch of stuff, matter that's just like glued together, we spiral down until nobody is noble, nobody is good, nobody is decent, nobody is virtuous. Like something out of the comic book The Watchmen, where there is nothing like a superhero. And as we spiral down into that madness, as Hamlet spirals down into that madness, because it is madness. Gertrude thinks that he's mad the minute he sees the ghost. But Shakespeare, ironically, is suggesting that The madness comes from not seeing the whole vision. It's from seeing things as just bits and pieces, fragments that you shore up against your ruin. That's the real madness. If, for instance, there is no definition, no guideline, no rule, no law, then the game can be played anywhere. Then there is no more game. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold, as Yeats says. So in this, here's Hamlet spiraling down into madness where it just becomes spluttering, yelling anger. Papa Satan, alepe, as the demon says in Dante. And in the midst of that, he sees that whole man, that effigy of gold, that kingly king, float into the room as a ghost. And he immediately is terrified, because it's a terrifying thing to see the Lord, right? Angels always say the first thing out of every angel's mouth, be not afraid, which they wouldn't have to say if you weren't like scared witless. But he immediately is terrified. Save me and hover over me with your wings, you heavenly gods. Right? He's just shocked. But I like to think, what would it be like to play this whole scene as though no ghost actually appears? Now, on stage, especially Elizabethan stage, you actually have to have an actor playing the ghost, right? Because it doesn't make any sense otherwise, and somebody has to say the lines. But what if the ghost is all in the head of Hamlet? What if it's just Hamlet and nobody else is there? If that's the case, then the ghost is part of his psyche. The ghost is part of his being in the state of madness. So here we have him suddenly being caught in the midst of this downward spiral, and he sees that man of alabaster, of gold, and that's when Gertrude says he's mad. Right? Alas, he's mad. And Hamlet says, do you come to chide your tardy son? Is that why you're here? He's speaking as though the ghosts are right there, talking to him. But he could be just talking to himself. It could be that he's talking to the vision that has come back to him suddenly, the vision of the God, of the deity, of wholeness. And it's interesting what the ghost says. Don't forget, right? This visitation, my showing up, is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose. What? Almost blunted purpose. In other words, you have so hammered at that stone with your sword that your sword is almost blunted from it. You're not using it the way you ought. And look, amazement on thy mother sits. Remember that I told you, taint not your soul and do no damage to your mother. And here you're very close to tainting your soul and to damaging your mother, because if you fall into madness and anger, you could do something rash like kill Polonius and then kill your mother. And you're tainting your soul with this madness you're falling into again. So step between her and her fighting soul. So go out of yourself and help Gertrude. Help someone else, right? Not just yourself. I find that really intriguing because I've read before that Hamlet is extremely self-absorbed, which is a pejorative way of looking at it, like a put down. But I do think he's self-absorbed in the way that an intelligent young man is self-absorbed when he grapples with these very powerful ideas and very powerful possibilities. And until he's able to find some answer to his questions, he is, well, we'd call it navel gazing. He's very in his head. And only when he starts to help other people does he come out of his head. There's a great movie, by the way, about this called, the movie is Pi, P-I, the number, the Greek number, pi. Darren Aronofsky, I think it is. And the character in there is extremely self-absorbed, trying to find the answer to the universe, mainly to solve the number pi, which is as yet an insoluble ratio. But in the movie, he does damage to his head, interestingly enough, because Darren Aronofsky is looking at with that madness, actually. looks like as well. So then the ghost says, conceit in weakest bodies, strongest works. And what does he mean by conceit? It's not conceitedness. It's not being full of yourself. It's imagination. Imagination in weakest body, strongest works. Speak to her, Hamlet. So one could play that whole ghost scene as though Hamlet suddenly having this vision again of what he could be. Whole, integral, intacta, virtuous. Having that vision suddenly seems almost to prompt him like conscience might prompt a person. Stop belittling her and help her. Go out of your way to help her. And that's when he does. And the anger that is prior to that moment when the ghost appears suddenly converts to a rational discourse that Hamlet has with her. I'm not mad, he says, but in craft, I'm pretending to be mad. And you have to pretend to be virtuous because right now you're in a bad way. I love that because that pretense can be seen as a mask. I'm pretending to be mad in order to mask people from finding out what I'm actually about. You need to pretend to be virtuous in order that you no longer, as he says, spread the compost on the weeds, that you no longer engage in this incestuous relationship with my uncle. And as he says, eventually, you might indeed be virtuous, which doesn't say much good for his mask of madness, which might lead him eventually to be mad. But that's an interesting take there because, of course, if we look at masks and our wearing of masks, that's totally bad. It's totally wrong. You know, if all that we do all the time is to keep a face and a jar by the door, as the Beatles said of Eleanor Rigby, then it's all just hypocrisy and it's all just lies. But it isn't all hypocrisy and lies. In the morning when you wake up and you feel down, you feel like you don't want to do this job anymore, and yet you get up and clean yourself and put on decent clothing and comb your hair and groom yourself and go down with a smile, that's a mask. You're not showing the world how down you are and how out of it you are and how tired you are. You're showing the world that you're capable and that you're cheerful and that you're ready to be able to confront whatever you need to confront. That's not pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That's wearing a mask. It's playing a role. Now, is that bad? I don't think so. Partly because you do it until you're able to actually feel it. You make the habit of virtue until you're able to actually feel the virtue. You make the habit of goodness or of chastity or of happiness or of strength until you actually have those things. And eventually your inner self conforms to that outer mask that you're wearing. And in that case, the mask isn't bad. What that does mean is that we have to be very careful about what masks we are wearing because they do tend to become what we are. How we act does tend to mold our interior selves. Charles Williams used to say, I don't always kiss my son because I love him. Sometimes I kiss my son in order to love him. And I'm reminded of a Rod Serling piece out of The Twilight Zone where all the people are wearing these masks while they wait for the old man to die so they can get his money. And when the clock strikes 12 and the old man dies and they take off their masks and their faces are the same as these hideous masks that they've been wearing. It's a really good episode. But it also speaks to that idea that whatever we have on our outer, our exterior, does tend to form our interior as well. And I think Shakespeare's getting at that in this scene. That Gertrude, if she is able to act in a way that is virtuous and do it again and do it again, it becomes easier to act in a way that is virtuous. And eventually her interior self might be virtuous indeed. In which case, how do we talk about that idea of nominalism versus realism? The words that we say, the acts that we do, the images that we
surround ourselves with, the ceremonies that we engage in, are they real? Is there anything that they connect to? Is there anything interior in us that actually participates in that? Who knows? But if you act as if they were real, and if you surround yourself with images of the good and the true and the beautiful, rather than the dark and the horrendous and the violent, don't you conform eventually to those images and ceremonies and activities and words? If you use words that are good and noble and true, don't you eventually conform to them? So that their meaning may be in the very fact that we make a habit of employing them. In much the same way that when you get up in the morning and you feel poorly and you still groom yourself and put on good clothes and wear a smile. But you don't do it just because we don't have anything alternative. Now, there was a book I read once, I forget the author, and he said we do these things as if they were true, because how else would we live but in sorrow? And there's something to that, but it's a little depressing. I think what Shakespeare's suggesting here, which is why I love the guy. Gosh, I'd love to sit down and have a beer with this guy, and with Plato, and with J.R.R. Tolkien and others. What he seems to be suggesting is that we do it for other people. Is Hamlet capable of being rational and kind and virtuous and having a learned discussion with his mother? Probably not in a state where he's raving. But if he's able to check himself and then act as if he were having this discussion, eventually it doesn't matter, because he conforms to that rational, ordered way of acting. And he does it not because he wants to be rational and whole. He does it because Gertrude is scared. The ghost says, look, she's scared. Help her out. And that's when Hamlet goes and helps her out. To put it another way, we act this way not for ourselves. We act this way so that other people might profit. We do it out of love for others, out of concern for them and desire for them to be happy. We do these ceremonies and these activities and use these words so that other people might see the true and the good and the beautiful. Whether we any more believe them or not, or whether or not they are more or less apparent to us at a stage in our life, to act as though they are true in some ways makes them true and allows other people to see them as true, and no longer see the world as dark and dour and bounded in a nutshell where we have bad dreams. And I think that begins to approach the event horizon of an answer to Hamlet's problem of the nominalist versus the realist position on Earth. It begins to hint at an answer. But we'll save that for another time, because we pretty much exhausted this time. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this was profitable to you. If you did find it profitable, check out my Patreon site, and otherwise continue in your own studies and your own joy and your own happiness. And until we meet again here on Facebook Live, God bless you and your families. Take care, stay healthy, and stay safe.